Hello and good evening, everybody. Welcome to the second proper edition of Monastery Live. It is a journey through the hearts and minds and sanity of gaming everywhere. It's a fun way to explore 2 hours. It's a way to drive everybody else completely freaking insane. My name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk for the evening, and with us we have the smooth, suave JT Vega and the pile of giant-ass comics, Doku. Say hi, everybody.
How's it going?
What's up?
It is October 3rd, 2017. And we got some fail for us today. As you can see on the screen, and let me clear some of this shit up. So how have you guys been doing on this Tuesday?
All I gotta say is it's pretty interesting week. A lot of things had happened. We had a lot of recent runabouts about the gaming industry and everything, and it's just pretty good.
Yeah, it's been an interesting week. I can say that much.
Yeah. Especially you hear about the news about let me see if I can remember the RPG of they're making an RPG of Warhammer.
Oh wait,
they're doing a new Cubicle 7 is doing a new edition. Unless you're talking about a new video game RPG, because that I didn't hear about.
Well, I know that you remember we talked about it a while back about that RPG, that they are about to release that soon enough. But they're still in the beta testing stages of that game.
Mm-hmm. We'll see how it plays out, because I have faith in Cubicle 7. They've put out some really good stuff so far. But then anyway, and hopefully we'll get to deal with that in a future installment. But anyway, now this particular article, I mostly have you to blame for this, Vega, for finding this.
I found this on Reddit. They kind of archived this and realized that the person who made this is advocating for peaceful games. That's pretty much what I see in this.
Yeah, we'll get into this, and I decided I am not going to. If I'm going to go through this, I'm not going to suffer alone. So I decided to drag you in and drag Doku in.
I understand. I understand. I'm sorry that I gave you this article, because this person really isn't aware about what Dungeons and Dragons did back in the days.
Yep. But anyway, I'm going to read a few. Now the safe word, stealing a gag from Mad Cat. Anytime you've got something to say through this reading, say Oklahoma, and then we'll go into that. But the article is, of course, called "Game Theory Chat: Decolonizing RPGs."
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize RPGs were a colony. I mean, colonial Gothic takes place in the American colonies, but that's just a setting. I didn't realize that you could colonize a hobby.
I think that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah, that's a pretty questionable title, to say the least.
Yeah. Well, it seems to be very similar to. You remember that bullshit a few months ago about decolonize our universities, where where some dumbasses in Africa thought that they needed to do black science or something like that.
Yeah, I remember hearing something about that. I kind of just let that one slide under the rug.
When it happens 3 times, it's a pattern. But anyway, see, published August 13th, 2017. by Meinberg, and it reads: RPGs have a violence problem. In almost not every non-indie tabletop RPG, combat receives special attention. It is given additional mechanical and narrative weight. It is brought to the surface and made as a primary tool of in-universe conflict resolution. Character creation is often a race to see who can cause the most harm. Okay, I have to stop here. I have to stop here. One, did anybody spot the weasel word?
Yeah, a little bit. Mm-hmm. I know, because you have to put the door after you.
I don't know. The narrative weight thing kind of makes me scratch my head a little bit.
The phrase non-indie to me comes off as weasel wordy.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, that it does.
And yes, you got it right. The indie specifically non-indie seems to be the weasel word in this, because if I bring up any example where that isn't the case, they could say, but I said almost every, or something, or actually they bring up, but that's an indie game. Or if it's about mainstream games, that anytime that somebody says mainstream RPGs, it's pretty much a shorthand for they're only talking about D&D and Pathfinder. As if this is back in the 1970s when that was the main game in town. Anyway.
So that's definitely a common SJW tactic, to provide yourself a way to back out and double down.
And to further reinforce these notions, the advanced systems in games like Dungeons & Dragons, encourage violence as a means to grow more powerful. It becomes the task of the player characters, typically self-made individuals reliant only on themselves and a small group of ideological comrades, to go into the parts of the world inhabited by savages. There they murder the individuals that they encounter, destroy their societies, and take their golden land in order to enrich themselves.
Okay, that kind of sounds like a really big brainwashed argument.
It very much sounds. It sounds like somebody took the. It sounds like somebody took the running gag about murder hobos a little bit too literally.
Murder hobos.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it.
That's why we had Hobo with a Shotgun.
But I like that movie, man.
It was actually a pretty good movie. I have to admit, I like Rutherford Holler.
Uh-huh. But as far as the whole, it very much comes off ridiculously strawmanny. Anyway, it goes, RPGs have a violence problem. What's the solution? And of course, you have this incredibly corny image right here.
That is weaponized cringe.
Yeah, never.
I think he's trying to advocate for a certain idea about diversity and everything. It's like, okay, so we're gonna have to. Okay, why don't we make a game called the UN? And you can make that game. And how can we resolve peaceful resolutions with other countries? Except
two things. One, that game already exists. It's called Civilization.
Ah.
Two, if you wanted to make a game called the UN, it'd basically be a game where nothing gets done.
Yep, that's true. But
yeah,
then
exactly.
again,
except for diddling in
scenario,
France.
It would be like the scenario of the actual UN, as in they just argue and debate about certain things, and they roll the dice on see who gets to go to war, who doesn't.
You could make it a little more interesting and call it the EU and see how that works out.
Yeah, that would be the interesting thing. That would be the greatest idea ever. Just to call it EU, the game. They could
call it EU, the game, and have it use the. Well, I'd say have it use a board the size of the board from the infamous War in Europe board game, which is one of those late '70s board games that decided to be ridiculously huge.
What's it doing on?
Oh, Axis and Allies?
You're not supposed to.
Worse.
Oh God,
Okay.
that just sounds like a cruel joke, to be honest.
Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can find the. Because if you want to see just how ridiculously huge that thing is, of course, there's also the infamous campaign for North Africa that might take you 7 years to finish.
Yeah, fuck that.
But
And when you're asked to do something, do it.
I'm going to put this in Skype for you guys, just so you can see it. That is the campaign for North Africa board game. That's the board for it. The kid is just laying there for scale.
Holy crap.
Oh, yes, I did.
I apologize.
Anyway.
I apologize. I apologize. I had to resolve some conflict.
No
Real
worries.
life conflict.
And anyway, the article then goes on to say that the solution is to emulate works that don't glorify violence, saying part of the problem arises from gamers from the genres being emulated in RPGs. Most tend to lean into more action-packed genres, and indeed, a large portion of media glorifies violence in a number of ways. They show violence as the ultimate means to an end and the last resort of a desperate person, but one to be applauded. That's something that can only work if you have a very limited view of things. And yes, and as far as this is feeling like it's coming very close to that line of so much media glorifies violence. That's why you have violent people in the real world.
Yeah, and that argument had been proven many times that it isn't the case.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they tried pulling that with video games as well. It didn't really work out for them.
Yeah,
no,
I can understand their idea of trying to, I can understand that they don't want kids to be influenced by violence and everything. But also you have to realize it's a cruel world out there too. And sometimes, people are influenced motivated by different means of violence.
Well, it's a very
reality
pointing kind of argument.
Yeah, that's true. It's kind of a gray area where if a person's motivated to violently attack someone, either if they claim that they lost their job because of so-and-so, or they wanted to steal something from that person, so-and-so, it's kind of the reality of the situation, depending on what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like either that, or they just are, or either that, or they are motivated because they're mentally insane.
Well, yeah, they want to point to things like video games and tabletop RPGs as for applications for violence, but never, ever, ever mention religious extremism to them.
Yeah, and I used to remember that one guy who was very crazy claimed that he saw ISIS videos and that motivated him to go and kill people.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, goes on to say, fantasy and sci-fi works, regardless of medium, tend to accentuate the primacy of violence. Fantasy is especially prone to this, especially in the pursuit of more epic storylines. Look at Game of Thrones. Of course, we're bringing up friggin' Game of Thrones. While much of the work covers the plight of the unfortunate souls trapped in civil war in Westeros, it still shows that the resolution to the problems faced is via more violence. We may hate the Freys for their role in the Red Wedding, but we also cheer when Daenerys unleashes her dragons on slavers. Which every time I see the royal we in this sort of thing, it always annoys me. But
the weird part is that Daenerys is using her dragons to promote fear and tyranny. That's the weird thing about her, is that yes, she's a nice person, but at the same time, you know, she's willing to kill anybody who gets in her way too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's also very historically accurate in terms of the portrayal of violence and warring clans and factions.
Yeah, because she has to you know, because she wants her. She's doing this out of the fact that her family lost their kingdom, and now she's the only ruler left to actually, you know, do what's necessary to actually get the kingdom back.
Mm-hmm.
And she's willing to do it by through promoting fear against those who follow her, those who are willing to, you know, because last time she basically lost everything when she lost her husband and everything, and she realized, fuck it, I'm not going to trust anyone anymore after what they have done to me. I'm going to go full out and destroy everything. And she did. She managed to destroy cities. She managed to destroy kingdoms out of this. She even and I was surprised that she heard the stories of people, you know, and she realized, okay, I'm going to kill all the rich people. Yeah, right. She let certain ones live out of the whole.
But anyway,
that were willing to follow her and serve her cause.
It goes, but work is being done to work on these notions. Bit of a grammar error there.
I was going to say
stories are being told in quieter forms that allow for other means of approaching and understanding conflicts. The primacy of power is increasingly being argued against. For instance, in the reimagining of Battlestar Galactica, protagonists are never the strongest individuals. Their use of violence is almost entirely in self-defense, and the show raises questions on whether or not humanity deserves to live and what damage is caused by cycles of violence. I think that's kind of missing the point.
Yeah.
When it comes to Battlestar Galactica, because the whole point when it came to that, especially the speech that that Adama did at the end of the miniseries, was that humanity needs to earn its survival. That it's not a right.
Yeah, and they had to go through so many trials in order to get through that day.
Mm-hmm. I've seen some people criticize that reimagining was too dark and didn't have much in the way of hope.
Yeah,
but very much is a story about having to fight to survive.
Mm-hmm.
It also promoted spirituality in some sense.
For better or for worse, yes.
Yeah, for better or for worse in some situations. And I was like watching this series, and it's like they were like talking about God, and I'm like, okay.
Well,
yeah, kind of a strange twist for a sci-fi series.
Yeah.
Well, it's also worth noting that that reimagining was done by Ronald D. Moore, and he basically wanted to zig where Star Trek had zagged. But anyway, he goes on. So when deciding genres and works to emulate, look for ones that don't glorify violence. It can be hard, but they're out there. Look for works where other tools exist for settling conflicts, be they words or sport or economics or careful planning. Look for works where if violence occurs, it is frightening and undesirable, and make games based on them. Okay. Now I believe this was the part you highlighted, JT, when you shared this with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the thing is, here's the question that I have.
Reddit. It was actually Reddit that did this.
Okay, but here's the question that I have, and this is something that I've always been indignant about.
Yeah.
Why are you not doing this? why are you asking for other people to do this for the sake of yourself? Why aren't you? Who is it who has dug up stuff like All the Days of My Children Hospital, or things like Primetime Adventures? Both of those are real games. I will share you the links if I have to. Those, I did not make that shit up.
I know. The Days of Our Lives.
There was an RPG based on Dallas.
Oh boy.
Yep.
Yes, you can role play to figure out who really shot JR.
Oh god. Oh man.
Yeah, and I'm assuming Murder She Wrote exists too.
It wouldn't surprise me if it did.
Yeah, they actually did make a video game of Murder She Wrote, but I don't know about an RPG of Murder She Wrote.
That in that genre was kind of what Primetime Adventures is supposed to be about. Oh yeah, there's also TBS 1980.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and also He-Man, the Masters of the Universe game.
Sad thing is, that's not the gayest game I have.
Yep. That's true because of Skeletor and He-Man. And Skeletor has a lot of issues in the closet.
Yeah, let's move on. but
he has a lot of skeletons.
The thing that this is really telling is that they probably ended up playing a few sessions of that sort of action-based D&D, and they decided to base the entirety of this article on it. Anyway, it goes, ground the protagonists in community. Too often, the protagonists of RPGs are the only characters given full agency and identity. Occasionally, this is also extended to villains to allow them to operate as equals. But other characters in the setting are often reduced to backdrop, with little mechanical weight, meaning they serve as narrative tools rather than as individuals within a wider world. That's kind of how storytelling is gonna work. And if you're expecting the GM, who already has enough work to treat NPCs like they're full characters. Again, it comes back to the whole thing of a novelist is just shorthand for a shit DM.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's like the guy probably doesn't go out that much, I'm assuming. Because even understanding that there are games out there like, I don't know, Shoots and Ladders has the most non-violent thing you would ever consider.
But that's a board game. If I wanted to use a tabletop game example,
yeah,
I could probably go with something like Alma Mater. Or Hellcats and Hockey Sticks.
Let me look up something here. Let's look up a non-violent RPG.
I think this guy is advocating for Chia Pet, the RPG.
Let's see. Oh, apparently there is non-violent.
Yeah, and it only took you a cursory Google search to find that.
That's true.
Anyways, it goes. But if these minor characters were given more weight, if they were given agency and the ability to influence the actions of activities of the protagonist, not merely narratively but mechanically, in a real and serious way, it would encourage players to think of them less as narrative tools and more as people. While it can be difficult to make these characters have the same presence since they are often controlled and gestalled by a single player rather than being an avatar, giving them additional tools to shape the narrative and have agency can help close that gap.
Yeah.
Which,
yeah.
Okay, maybe I was giving them too much. Maybe I was giving this writer too much credit.
Mm-hmm.
It very much that kind of thing is something that is going to work in video games, not in tabletop games, because you're asking somebody to effectively play the GMPC. and nobody
Yeah.
likes a GMPC.
It seems like they want. If they really want something, they might as well just make a sex game or something out of an RPG. But then again, that's not going to happen because people do not like those type of erotic fantasy RPGs. That's
Actually, if they did that, then this idiot would probably complain that
it does exist though. It does exist.
Oh yeah, it does exist.
Because I used to remember the Book of Erotic Fantasy. That one was an RPG of itself.
If you think the Book of Erotic Fantasy is the bottom of the barrel, it's not.
It's not.
No.
But I know people do play that.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just usually something you don't go to your local game or hobby shop to play in public.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah, you play that in private. Like I'm pretty sure chicks do it too.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, because they would write a story. They would write a story about a fantasy about I don't know, a lesbian relationship with an orc.
It's basically DeviantArt, the RPG.
DeviantArt, the RPG.
I should send this person a copy of Fatal.
Yeah.
Anyway, because in addition, moving away from power fantasy as the sole goal of the game can help to have the protagonist rely on other characters for assistance. By highlighting, mechanically and narratively, how much the protagonists need the help of others, they come to respect their role within a community and understand that their accomplishments are shared, not theirs alone. Bit of a grammar fail there. Once again, this comes off as not understanding what RPGs are, for one, and not understanding why things work the way they work. It very much feels like they want a novel, not a game.
Yeah.
And by the way, Fireball, as far as your suggestion, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. Let's see.
And Tanner sends me a message on Facebook that says, "Do it. Send him Fatal."
That would be a fatal triggering.
Yes.
Doku, have you ever heard of Have you ever heard the Legend of Fatal?
I've heard people talk about it. I've never really looked into it myself.
It is the worst RPG of all time. There is no question. There is no argument. It is the game that gave us the meme of anal circumference.
Oh, God. That's why I've heard people talk about it. Oh boy. I'm not even sure what to say to that one.
Anyway.
Well, just as an aside, I don't think this guy understands the basic principles of how narratives work.
They understand how narratives work, but I don't think they understand how interactive narratives work.
Fair point. I think this guy wants to see Hot Pie be the prince who was promised.
Possibly. Anyway, goes on to say, deconstructing the hero's journey narrative in this way reminds characters and players that a diversity of ideas and viewpoints help to create a stronger foundation. It creates narratives that are richer, that allow for deeper betrayals and more enduring displays of loyalty. It allows for characters to become part of a world rather than independent movers that barely interact with the world.
I'm really starting to question if this guy actually plays RPGs or if he just read someone complain about it and decided to mirror their article.
Jury's out on that because if they had actually played, I'd be seeing some stuff about mechanics and people giving their own suggestions. But then again, that might be actually work, and we already know that work is a tool of the patriarchy. Anyways, it then says decolonize incentives. In older games, the incentives of games are distinctly colonized. They reward killing of enemies and the taking of their belongings. While more recent games have made moves to make advancement and incentive removed from violence and theft, they often do so in a way that is neutral. Players are instead incentivized for engaging with and achieving victory in the narrative. However, when the narratives are still rooted in colonization, this can simply indirectly reinforce colonization. Except here's the thing. A game in and of itself, with rare exception, is not a narrative. The narrative is determined by the people who are playing. That is the whole friggin' point. There are some games that are they're more designed for a specific genre or style of storytelling.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're supposed to allow players some creative liberties. It's not like you're forcing someone to make certain decisions in the game. Like, you present them with situations and then they have to go through those situations. But I'm not sure what this guy's point is.
Yeah. Let's see, instead, games can incentivize actions that specifically decolonial. They can reward characters and players for engaging with potential enemies, for de-escalating conflicts, for helping to assure the sovereignty of less militarily powerful states. Games can encourage players to cooperate with their peers to seek solutions that lead to mutual improvement rather than pursuing selfish goals above all else. And, oh god, a lotus? Really?
Oh boy. Well, that might be one of the most cliched things I've ever seen in an article.
And also, it carries with it the claim that the people who do these, who make games, and the people who play them are in a position to do that sort of peacemaking. And I just have this image in my mind of someone trying to do that. And then do you remember the bear guy? The guy who thought he could talk to bears when he did that documentary about him?
I think so.
Oh, see the dude that got killed by the Kodiak?
Yeah, he got eaten.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, that's what comes to mind with this sorts of thing. It's like the person
I think it's like like another example, the Canadian who thought he can use armor to protect himself against a bear.
Yeah, there's a Darwin Award if I ever heard it.
Actually, he actually had several patents for bulletproof vests.
Huh. So he tried to bear-proof himself.
Yep.
Yeah, that's definitely a Darwin Award.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he's trying to do that so he can basically wear like a foam protection against bears. That's pretty much how it works.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't see something like that.
It's the same guy. It's the same guy who did who was trying to invent the Halo armor for the military. Crazy guy, but he actually saved a lot of lives with his patents.
Huh.
It's not the bear-proofing one.
Yeah. Anyway, it goes. And in order to reinforce these notions, games need to be explicit in their purposes. The damage of colonization is seldom taught well or fully. The damage done by violence is often understated. The importance of picking the moment and stances to defend are underdeveloped. Even intelligent players can suffer from an educational system that writes history in terms of great people and great battles, rather than as systems interacting in positive and negative ways. This is another way that games are more than important, how they're vital to our education as citizens of the world.
Citizens of the world. Wow.
Oh, all right, we went there.
Yeah.
I wonder if this guy really does work for the EU. This sounds like something an EU PR representative would say.
An EU/UN representative.
Either that or somebody who graduated from tolerance camp. If you remember that thing from South Park.
Oh man.
Yeah, because either way, they never went to the North Pole, haven't they? there's so much tolerance up there that they can easily freeze to death.
Yeah, everybody freezes equally.
Yep, everyone freezes equally up in the North Pole and the South Pole, and the South Pole, where they can find all the Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
And discover the entrance to the Hollow Earth, which is flat.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And then to see a whole bunch of Russians trading up there too. Cool. Crossing all the way to the Antarctic.
I think this guy wants to invent Flower Farmers, the game.
Yeah, except that's already been done. Twice.
Yep.
What the shit? Well, Simpsons did it.
Yep. Anyway, Kyoryu goes, that lotus needs to be more black. Kyoryu, no. Do not give me the nightmares about trying to find a black lotus. So say if this guy, Gal, has ever played a TRPG and never had to solve a problem with words. He's been playing with a shit DM. What are you
playing? He's been playing with his penis more than his
dice, maybe.
Yeah.
Let's see. Goes on. Let's see what. Oh, there's one response from George Jackson saying, "Quote: This is driven by a great many assumptions about how groups play RPGs. Indeed, a lot of gaming groups of 14-year-olds are probably cutting a swath through their fantasy world, but that is not the status quo across the board." Sorry, carbonation. In every game I've participated in with adults, avoiding combat through guile or negotiation is rewarded equally to resolving an encounter by scorching the earth, and it is often the wiser choice. Violence still exists. You aren't going to hug it out with the undead horde descending on the town, as they are supremely uninterested in sitting down for a drum circle. But whenever there is a force that can be reasoned with, all the gaming groups I've been in at least open to reasoning with them before swords, guns, etc. are drawn. Even 4th edition D&D, decried by many as being essentially a turn-based wargame, and many of its published adventures include sections for how a group of players might parlay with this or that opponent, rather than going straight to rolling initiative and hopping into a fight. In the game I've been running, I've been frankly surprised at how often the players have opted to do just that, unprompted by me, and I've always worked to accommodate peaceful impulses when possible. It didn't work so well with the insane wraiths, but they did try. And I think that pretty much sums it up. This article very much feels like they only relied on a straw man idea of how games and game design works.
Yeah, because they never played D&D. Heck, I had to negotiate certain things in a situation before, even though I was terrible at it. One time, I played a cleric, and I had to convince the people, in order to give me information, I had to convince them that they were in danger. That they were very much in danger from evil. And I had to convince them. And I had to do that whole evangelical thing. Like, I had to convince them that they're really in danger. You must confess. What have you done to unleash this evil that has been here? And I found out that they dug up corpses, and they told me where to find the person who paid them to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very simple negotiating, because I actually convinced them without bribing them or anything like that. It was kind of funny, because one of my friends decided to, get on their gnomes, and they were like dressed up. They were dressing up, and then finding out they pretended to be like ugly monsters. Back away! I knew what they were, and I said, I had to lie my way through it just to be like, back away, you evil demons! Back away, for I am the god, for I am the cleric of Cord, of course.
The power of Christ compelled you.
Yeah, pretty much. It kind of worked to convince them of of confessing to me the information.
Hey, you got to do what you got to do.
Yep.
No, yeah, especially going up against, especially when they saw me take out a dragon, and they thought, because they were like, "Damn, this guy," because I only had like a strength of 10, and then I transformed myself to He-Man, and I killed the dragon with 2 because he had. It turns out he had like 2 points left, and everyone was like following me for some reason because I saved the day.
Uh-huh.
I wasn't the because that one ability that allows you to get like from I forget, it was like one of the cleric abilities that you get from your god that allows you to get like certain amount of strength if you get a day, and you can only use it once a day.
That's like straight up from the Elder Scrolls.
Yeah, and it was kind of funny too. I was just like. Well, I took out the dragon, and then of course I had to convince more and more. Like, heck, I couldn't convince the ghost that he was in danger. He killed me after that. I was just like, damn. Would have gotten him too. I would have got him. Would have got him to follow me, but no, he'd killed me.
One does not negotiate with the undead.
Yeah, no, the dead do not negotiate with the living. You learn that hard.
Oh, plus there's been plenty of cases where somebody decides I'm going to try and reason with them. One of the more famous cases for me, it was in the film Darkness Rising, where the bard decided, I'm going to see if I can soothe them by playing bardic music. And he gets shot in the chest with about 12 arrows.
I bet this guy who wrote this article
you can't always convince people by negotiating with them, because they will not negotiate at times, because chances are the only way to negotiate them is to either scare them silly, which I had done sometimes, or because I remembered I remembered I had to take out the leader in order for them to convince them that I am their savior. I had to tell them that my God will destroy you, and I killed the guy, and everyone was just like, "Okay, you're the leader now."
keep what you
Yeah. Yeah, because it wasn't like it was like one of the orcs that I told him, "Look, if you do not do as I say, my God will destroy you." and then slowly I was just like, okay. And then I killed him in one shot. It was like one spell, and then I just killed him. It was like, oh shit, the guy took him out.
Yep.
Take out the leader, and
the other thing that I couldn't help but notice throughout this entire thing is that they keep saying about how there's more ways to do it, but never really giving an example, and never really giving a case of an actual alternative.
I think most people find that that there are alternatives, but the problem is not everyone's aware of what those alternatives are sometimes.
Well, if this person is going to say there's alternatives, there's alternatives, just go seek them out. It's like, okay, but if that's the case, then why don't you show them in your argument instead of expecting everyone else to do the work?
Yeah, you might as well just make NASA the video game or something like that, or NASA the RPG, where you have to figure out how to get a rocket up into space and rolling a dice.
Yeah, except for one, I've already done that, and two, like I said, when it comes to that sort of thing, because here's the thing. When you're when you're playing a game like this, when you're playing an RPG,
Yeah.
oftentimes you will not be in the position to be able to make these sort of big decisions that this article wants you to do. Sometimes you're just a sellsword. Sometimes you're answerable to people bigger than you.
Or a prostitute.
Yeah, there's that too, especially if you're in a game based on a Frank Miller work.
Yep.
Streetwalkers RPG.
Streetwalkers, the RPG.
That's been done a few times already. So,
Well, I believe it.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, I would believe it. And I remember the Monopoly game that was controversial about the ghetto.
Monopoly Compton edition.
Yep, pretty much what happened. And of course, people got offended by that one.
Well, you can't please everybody.
Yeah,
And-
that was
yeah,
the
this
situation with.
and yet the writer of this article seems to think that you can by just talking, and then it'll magically happen.
Yep.
Well, this is one of those very, those articles you see where it's a blatant virtue signal. They're not even trying to hide it. Most people who actually do engage in the hobby that you're discussing can sniff it out pretty quick. Like, what's diversity in comics call them? Fake geek girls and fake geek guys.
Mm-hmm.
And you see this throughout a lot of like nerd culture. It started with video games. It moved into comics when that got popular, and now you're starting to see it in like tabletop. It just reminds me of that one article. We need more diversity in Warhammer 40,000.
Yeah, or Crawford for D&D 5th edition, claiming that we need to make our adventures more queer.
Yeah.
There's the argument that Magic the Gathering is sexist.
They've been doing that for a while. It's like they've been trying to, convince people that these games, and it's like, yeah, you don't have to make those games. Like, you can make your own idea, but the problem is, will it sell well with people? I don't know. But the thing is
Probably
that
not.
you got to attempt it. You got to do it. You got to think about what do you want in the game. It's like most people don't understand. You can make that game, but is there a market out there for it? Maybe, possibly. Probably the Christians would probably buy it because God knows they would probably buy a non-violent game. Or the Buddhists probably would buy it because it's a non-violent game.
That would require material goods.
Yep.
Good point.
Yep. And the thing is that they don't understand that you can make that game happen, but you're advocating for something like this. You need to understand, can you make that game happen? I don't know. Can you make a non-violent game RPG that will possibly work? Well, that depends on you. Are you willing to make it work? Or do you have the desire to make it work?
Well, most
that's the
people
thing.
are way too lazy to put in that kind of effort.
Yeah, and that's the problem. They're advocating for something, but they're not doing it. They're not actually doing it. If they can prove to the world that they can make an RPG that is non-violent, that is, as they are advocating for, they should make that game. No one's stopping you, but the problem is, who's going to buy that game? Will anyone think of it as a good game to buy? I don't know, but chances are someone would like it. Someone would like it. Someone would buy it. It depends on you how you want to do it. You want to sell it for educational purposes, or you want to sell it in the mainstream, hopefully it would be popular. But at times, it's not going to always be mainstream. Hell, D&D tried to do that back in those days, and it wasn't like a big mainstream game. It was pretty much, held in private, with groups of people who wanted to play it, either in college or in high school. Or it's like you can't really, expect everyone to, go and make a game that is non-violent. You have to, why don't you make the game and and figure out what would be the perfect game idea that would be nonviolent.
Yeah, pretty much. And I know Appavand also tackled this matter, but to me, when I saw this kind of thing, I was just so insulted that I felt like, you know what, I may as well tackle this thing on my own in my own way. But the thing that always annoys me is it's like when they say that we need more diversity, except I don't see them talking about the sword and soul subgenre of fantasy fiction, which is basically can be described as African Conan, but that's kind of selling it short.
African Conan.
Well, it's basically doing the whole sword and sorcery thing, just with a lot of nods to African mythos.
Yeah,
and
with a lot of fantasy in it.
Or games like Ki Konga or Orion Legacy of the Coriodan. But yeah. No, it's people like me who don't give a shit about that kind of thing that are trying to highlight it. And as Tanner had pointed out, Imara, which maybe I'll dig into that at another time. But the point is that for all the talk of the reason why I keep using these people as a punching bag is for all the talk of wanting to make these more diverse things, they never follow through on it, and if they do follow through on it, it's half-assed.
Yeah, it is.
Well, that's what a lot of
I think a lot of them lack experience in what they're doing because they haven't really thought of what they wanted to put into a game. Because some of them, you have to realize, they're indie. They're basically they're the wannabe game developers that want to make a game.
It just sounds like No Man's Sky all over again.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you have to realize No Man's Sky was like a big deal. Like some of them, I know there's certain indie developers that have experience, in the business. Like some of them have decided to go independent because they didn't like what EA had done in the past or some other game development company. That's why they decided to go indie, because they lost their jobs because of this.
Mm-hmm.
And EA is definitely the perfect example of that.
Yeah, and the fact that a lot they want to compete against those type of companies in order to become indie. Like I understand that a lot of them have practiced very hard to get their businesses set up to where people can like them, and the biggest problem with that is like you got people like Phil Fish who is respected in the indie, development community, but not respected when it comes to, PR and shit like that.
That just reminds me what happened with, do you remember that game, Kingdoms of Amalur?
Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah, that was a really sad story with what happened, because the game itself wasn't half bad. In fact, there were things that it did that I actually really liked. And in some ways, I considered it the anti-Fable, just because Fable had been pissing me off for several years by that point. But the fact that they weren't able to break even, and because of how they financed the game, the guy who's run it has been in so much trouble since.
Yeah, he wasn't able to, because he was getting loans from certain companies, and it's like
he was getting loans from a business startup thing with the Rhode Island government.
Yeah, he should have never went to Rhode Island. He should have just went to either some other state or something like that. But then again, he chose Rhode Island, which is the most expensive area to be at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he could have just
You think he could have
Go
broke
ahead.
even if he moved the studio over to like Texas or something?
Probably, because at least it's cheaper there.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah,
it would have been cheaper. It would have been cheaper to go to Texas or to another state that doesn't give a shit about because like I know that there's like you can either buy or rent a building and just hopefully that would work out. But the biggest problem was I think the guy never was aware of what he was doing when he set up that business, because you have to realize this guy was a baseball player back in the days. And
Yeah, he was a baseball player, and he was an avid fan of
World of Warcraft.
MMOs.
Actually, he did play World of Warcraft. I know that because I remember he.
Well, World of Warcraft, EverQuest, and I think a few others, but he was a big defender of those sorts of games.
Yeah, and I feel bad for him.
I think,
but for one thing, he probably didn't know how to deal with business or manage money, and that was the biggest problem with managing.
Yeah, that definitely was a big issue. The money management was horrible, and EA basically took them for everything they had.
Yeah, because he probably didn't. He made some really bad deals, and those deals he should have never made. He should have just talked to an advisor, or probably talk to somebody that would know what they're talking about. But unfortunately, those people must have really fucked. Those people he probably listened to fucked him over.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like an MC Hammer scenario.
Yeah, because he should have read the contracts. He should have read a lot of the stuff that happened, because a lot of the stuff that they have done, EA has, from what I heard from people, from the developer of EA has done some shady stuff. They have practically tried to go after their developers that they work for, and they basically tried to recruit them.
Well, this reminds me of something I was going to say that ties back into the article we were just reading.
Mm-hmm.
If you take this highly virtuous, overly trusting, the nicest guy on the planet approach to life, there is going to be someone at some point in time that's going to use you as a glorified grug to elevate themselves. Like, that's just human nature. Yeah. And these people that advocate for this, like, overly compassionate mindset are the first ones that end up getting screwed over by somebody, because they just live in an idealistic world that it does not exist. Like, that's like the gazelle trying to be friends with the lion.
True. And that's the biggest problem with them, is that they basically are too nice, and they take it, and others just take advantage of that.
Yep.
I mean, they do. It is a focus on a lot of these nice sounding words, but the problem is words mean nothing without actions. Absolutely nothing.
Well, I find you get three kinds of people when it comes to this mindset of thought. You end up with the Lacey Greens of the world, you end up with Philip DeFrancos of the world, and then you end up with the Anita Sarkeesians of the world. Like, there's really only three subsets of stereotypes that I've seen from the, not the SJW mindset, but the nicer, more compassionate individuals who aren't, people like Keemstar or something like that, where it's just willing to rip into you or throw you under the bus.
Yeah. But Anita, on the other hand, isn't really compassionate, because even if you tried to, ask her a question, why is this, she'll block you on Twitter type of thing.
Oh yeah, like
yeah, because I heard from
Slot.
Dan Slot. Even though he said that we have to have understanding, like he's like most people are saying that we need empathy. When they use that word, it's like I don't think they understand what that word means.
They understand that it's a nice. They understand that it's a nice sounding word, and it can be a word that can be used to make them look good. And that's the thing that you see a lot. There's a reason why when it comes to articles like this, and when it comes to people like Dan Slott or the like, I refer to their stuff as flowery arms and embroidered legs.
Yeah.
But when I see people use the word empathy, the ability to understand or the ability to share feelings of another, I understood what their feelings are. Their feelings are to either make money because they are desperate, lie for it. So yeah, I do understand. That is what empathy means, to understand and share feelings of another. Yeah, I understand what that person is doing.
Well, that's why they virtue signal, but they're never virtuous in their action.
Yeah, they're never virtuous because I'm not convinced about their virtue signaling. If you're going to use that as a noun, saying I have no empathy, there is a reason. I do have empathy. It just means I know what they're thinking. I know what they're feeling. Their feelings are they're angry. Therefore, they're also mad that they're not that they're taking advantage of the situation without even you knowing about it, because therefore you have no empathy. You have no awareness of what you're talking about.
Well, it's also very obvious how much these types of individuals love to project.
Yeah, because they have no idea, because they think they have empathy, but therefore they don't have empathy.
Yeah.
Or again, they probably just see empathy as a nice sounding word, but not much else.
And the ability to understand someone's feelings, I can understand their feelings. I can understand their ideas, what they're trying to do, what their intentions are. Therefore, I do have empathy, but I do it in a different sort of tone, in a different sort of way.
Well, it reminds me of that. There's like an old adage of when people have skeletons in the closet, they assume everybody else has skeletons in the closet as well.
Yeah.
I forget how that actual saying goes, but it's a pretty spot-on description.
Well, it doesn't help that we keep seeing so many cases of people on a moral pedestal, and then we find out some things that are very unsavory about them.
Well, also, when you tend to put yourself on a pedestal, people tend to also pay more attention to you. So tread lightly, lest you fall through the thin ice.
Yeah, but they're not thinking that far. And getting back to the article, I decided to do some double checking, and there is a sort of, I guess I'll use the term arrogance in this sort of thing, because a lot of it comes down to the way all of you people are running your games is wrong. You need to run it my way, ignoring the fact that I can go to two different tables where tabletop is happening. I can go to the event center. I can go to the FFG event center up in St. Paul. Well, not technically St. Paul, but I'm not going to split hairs. And I can go between table to table, and I'll find different games being played different ways. Sometimes I could find the same game being played different ways. And the thing is, with a lot of games that have a mainstream appeal, is the fact that you have multiple avenues. There is no one true way. And anyone who says that there's supposed to be this one true way that you're supposed to play the game is either lying or a fool.
Usually the latter.
Honestly, I can go either way. Because I've seen many times where people act like the straw man here is that the only way people play D&D, and I'm using that just because they're only thinking of the most popular example, is that people only play murder hobos and nothing else.
Murder hobo. Yeah,
Still love that.
more like I believe that they're more likely playing with their dicks more than they are playing with their.
I do
their
not
dice.
need that mental image in my mind, JT.
That's what I see in this whole situation with them is that they're mostly playing with their egos than their dice because they don't understand the probability of chance.
Well, they think it's all hack and slash, but they don't realize there's an entire subset of character built around playing a lute.
Yeah, there's also puzzles and everything. Like you have to, and riddles. I remembered I had to do riddles in a game too. It's not just that, and also traps. You have to deal with the mazes. You have to deal with a lot of things in a game that are that way too.
Although when you mention traps, that means I have to ask the all important question that has to be asked every single time.
Yes.
Are traps gay?
Yes.
Yes.
Traps are gay.
Yes, this has been established, and it still gets asked every time.
Yes, it does get a lot of. It does get asked a lot. It all depends because I know that there are traps that do this for money. Others do it just for fame. Others just do it for attention.
Yep, money. Let me just get this gag out of the way. Money for nothing and checks for free.
Yep.
Pretty
much.
But anyway, the whole a while back I had run an odd little game called Mystic Imperium, and there is that game builds itself around 3 pillars: combat, exploration, and puzzles. Each of them has several chapters dedicated to it.
Several chapters, right?
Yeah, several chapters dedicated to it, and several abilities and mechanics dedicated to it. But I know what somebody like this is going to say if I list off these examples, that is an indie game.
Yeah.
Again, using that backdoor double down.
Mm-hmm.
Also, another interesting thing that popped out to me in this article was they completely ignore one of the basic narrative principles of any style of storytelling, be it if you're writing a book, playing a game, doing a video game, any creative medium. All stories have conflict, but conflict doesn't necessarily mean it's hack and slash. Conflict can be something as simple as you lost a key.
Yeah, or
you gotta go find it.
Or you can negotiate something. You can always negotiate something. Like heck in any D&D campaign, you can negotiate something. Like I had to negotiate with kings, queens, and thieves in order to get what I want.
Well, that's another big part of the
vampires.
And that's another big part of the one of the few golden rules of any kind of narrative that you're going to be doing is character interaction. Not all characters are the same.
Yep.
Have you ever seen the film Adaptation? It was this kind of slept on Nick Cage film about trying to adapt a work into a film, or trying to adapt a quote unquote true story into a film.
Adaptation. Nicolas Cage. I think so. I don't know.
I don't think I did.
There's a speech in the middle of it where the guy who's doing this panel is asked, how would you adapt something where not much happens? And he says, well, first off, if you build a movie without conflict or crisis, you're going to bore your audience to tears. Second, not much happens in the world. Are you out of your fucking mind? People are murdered every day. There's hunger, war, disease every fucking day. Someone betrays his best friend for a woman. Someone's beaten half to death on the steps of a church. If you can't find that stuff in life, then you don't know crap about life. And why the fuck are you wasting my 2 hours with your movie?
Yeah, that's pretty spot on.
That's just look. It's the sweet irony is that people like this act very much like they are on a they are living in a bigger fantasy world than people like me who write and perform and do stuff about fantasy. It is
the sweet irony. I said, the sweet irony.
Yeah, that is the beautiful irony of the matter. That they act like you remember that whole "I want to teach the world" that cheesy as "I want to teach the world this thing" song from back in the day that was just one glorified Coke advertisement?
Oh yeah, I remember that.
I would not be surprised if that is their personal Bible. That they because for the longest time I've had to wonder whether or not it's an act or whether or not they legitimately believe this. And as time has gone on, I've started to lean towards the latter. And hello there, Bayonetta.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if I can find that other article. The other instance that came to mind is there was an article a few months ago by Mythcreants that said that player consent and collaboration are vital, except the article itself devolved into making your game into essentially a novel. And as I said before, a novelist is just shorthand for a bad DM.
Yeah, you can't really create a story around it unless you know what you're doing.
Yeah, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because even I heard my I know my friend had an issue with me, and he knew for the fact that he likes to create stories around it. So I decided to just mess around with his story. And you have to realize not everyone always follows the way of D&D. They do their own thing.
And
but trying to railroad them
with some games that I've played over the years, taking the D&D method is a surefire route to get you killed. Let me see if I can a very good example, a famous example. You can't do the whole kill them all and take their stuff in something like Shadowrun.
Yep.
Because of the fact that in that kind of place, there is always somebody who's higher up on the food chain than you.
Yeah, and that is true.
Oh yeah, that's very true.
Or
you don't want to piss
somebody
off one
who's
person.
willing to stab you in the back and make your job more quote unquote interesting. Although
a little bit of enrichment.
I'm surprised that people like this that aren't trying to play Proletariat the Uprising because they like to LARP as revolutionaries.
Yeah, they might as well they might as well make Revolution the RPG. How
yeah, except here's the problem. That's already been done a bunch of times.
Yep.
Antifa the RPG.
It's already been done.
Oh yeah, I believe it. I also feel like a lot of these individuals, the most hardship they've been through in life is deciding what shoes they're going to wear and having to put gas in their car.
I think you're giving too much credit.
I probably am.
But let's see. It's been about an hour and a half. It would be a good time to go with what's going to be happening for the rest of the week. Tomorrow at 8 Central Standard Time, I am once again joining up with the RVT crew to continue the story of The Enemy Within, the weekly Warhammer Fantasy campaign that's been going on there.
Mm-hmm.
On Thursday, of course, I will be hopefully rejoining both of you on Lord Nurgle's weekly podcast, The Stream of Corruption.
Yeah. And as for me, I'm going to probably be helping Johnny P, a.k.a. he'll be the Internet Sheriff, which is more chaotically the worst show ever made. But then again, he is getting some likes on his stream that I created for him.
Maybe if I'm in the mood, I'll crash the party.
Go ahead, man. Anyone's welcome to crash into that live stream. That's the point. It'd become like another version of Ghost.
Maybe if I have nothing to do, I'll join you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
he'll be talking shit about everyone's waifus and such.
So pretty much what I do on Sundays, anyways.
Yeah.
So with that said, on behalf of JT Vega and Doku, my name is Mildra. I'm your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.